Hi, boys and girls. Before we left school, we had started reading the book The Wild Robot Escapes. We had finished The Wild Robot. And if you recall, at the end of the book, stated that Roz, had been mangled and her body parts were kind of strewn all over the island. And the Rescos came and the animals, and Roz defeated the Rescos. But Roz was so badly injured that she had to go back to the makers in order to be fixed and not bring more terror to the island. Because remember, the Resco's last words to Roz were, "If you don't go now, more are coming." So that's where we left off with the Wild Robot. And then we started the Wild Robot Escapes, but we didn't get to finish it because we had to leave school. So I thought I could record a few chapters a day and we could read the Wild Robot Escapes together. So if you have the book at home, feel free to follow along. I'll be recording a few chapters at a time. Um, if you don't have the book at home, feel free to use this as a read aloud, and I'll try to display the pictures to you just like I would in class. We got to chapter 23 at school. So if you remember what was going on and you remember everything that has already been read, then you guys can just pick up on chapter 23. But for those of us who don't remember or who haven't read the book yet at all, I'm going to start back at chapter number 1 and read a few chapters a day. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1, The City. Our story begins in the city with buildings and trees and bridges and parks. Humans were strolling, automobiles were driving, and airships were flying, and robots were hard at work. Weaving through the city streets was delivery trucks. The trucks knew where to go and how to get there all by itself. One particular truck pulled up to a construction site and automatically unloaded some crates. A few more turns and it unloaded more crates down the docks. The truck zigged and it zagged and across the city, delivering crates as it went, and then it merged onto the highway. Cars and buses and trucks were cruising along the highway together, but as the delivery truck continued, the traffic jam became lighter, the buildings became smaller, and the landscape became greener. With nothing but open road ahead, the truck altered onto its top speed. The landscape outside was now just a green blur, occasionally broken by a flicker of gray as a town flew past. On and on the delivery truck went, racing over long bridges, shooting through the mountain tunnels, gliding down the straight stretches of highway until it started to slow. It drifted from the fast lane to the exit lane and then rolled down the ramp onto a farm in the country. Clouds of dust billowed up behind the trucks as it drove past the fields and fences. In a hazy distance, enormous barns loomed above the plains. The air was thick with the smells of soil and livestock. Robot crews methodically worked the crops and fed the animals and operated the massive farm machines. A hill gradually climbed up into view. The hill was crowned with trees and white buildings, another farm, but this one was smaller and shabbier than the rest. Out front, the crooked sign read Hilltop Farm. Wheels crunched on gravel as the delivery truck rolled up to the driveway and up to the top of the hill. It stopped beside the front of the porch of the farmhouse and dropped off the last crate to the ground. Then the truck drove away. Readers, can you guess what was tightly packed inside that crate? If you guessed a robot, you are correct. And this was no ordinary robot. It was Razum, Unit 7134. You might remember her old life on the remote island, the Wild Island. Well, Raz's new life was about to begin. Chapter 2, The Crate. Woof, woof, woof. Inside the farmhouse, a dog was barking and scraping at the front of the door. When the door finally opened, a dog scurried out and bounced down the steps. And then a man appeared. The man walked with a limp and slowly made his way down to the crate where his dog was sniffing around. He unlatched the top of the crate, swung it open by the hinges. Packing foam was tossed to the side, restraining cords were unfastened, and there was Razum, Unit 7134. Her lifeless body sparkled in the late day sun. The man reached down and pressed a little important button on the back of the robot's head. Click. Chapter 3, The Robot. The robot's computer brain booted up and her programs began coming online. Then she automatically stepped out of her crate, and started to speak. Hello, I am Razum, Unit 7134, but you may call me Roz. While my robotic systems are activating, I will tell you a bit about myself. Once fully activated, I will be able to move and communicate and learn. Simply give me a task and I will complete it. Over time, I will find better ways of completing my tasks. I will become a better robot. When I am not needed, I will stay out of the way and keep myself in good working order. Thank you for your time. I am now fully activated. Chapter 4, The Family. Welcome to Hilltop Farm, Roz. My name is Mr. Sharif. You belong to me now. Roz studied the man with her soft, glowing eyes, and a robotic voice said, Hello, Mr. Sharif. This old fella here is Oscar. Mr. Sharif scratched the dog's head. You won't see much of him. Oscar spends most of his time sleeping in the house. Hello, Oscar, said the robot. A goofy grin stretched across the dog's face, and he let out a happy yelp. Mr. Sharif pulled a small computer out of his pocket. He tapped the screen and brought a map up of Hilltop Farms. You are here, Roz, he said as the robot's electric signal appeared on the map. You'll be working all over the farm, and now that you are in the system, I can always see where you are. What would you like me to do? Said Roz. You can start by putting your crate in the garage over there. I'll hold on to it in case I ever have to send you back to the factory. Clearly, Roz was designed to take orders because her body automatically did as she was told. She stuffed the packing material into her crate and carried it to the garage. When Roz returned, Mr. Sharif was watching a school bus winding down the country road. Oscar barked and dashed off as the bus came to a stop at the bottom of the driveway. A girl and a boy jumped out and the bus drove on. In their matching school uniforms, the children looked almost identical, but the boy was a little taller and the girl's hair was a little longer. They meandered up the driveway and romped around with their dog until they noticed Roz. A robot, said the girl, running up. It's about time we got one, said the boy. She's refurbished, said the man. She's the cheapest one I can find, but she'll make a decent farmer. What's her name? Said the girl. Her name is Roz. That's just her starter name, said the boy. We can give her any name we want. Let's call her Farmbot. I kind of like the name Roz, said the girl. Me too, said Mr. Sharif. Let's leave her name as it is. Roz, I'd like you to meet my daughter Jaya and my son Jad. Hello, Jaya and Jad, said the robot. The children looked at each other and smiled. Will Roz take orders from me? Said Jad. What about me? Asked Jaya. She'll take orders from both of you. Roz, I order you to do my homework, said Jaya. Don't waste her time with nonsense, said Mr. Sharif. Roz is here to do farm work, not homework. Do you understand? The children nodded. Now, I order you kids to bring the dog inside and do your homework, said Mr. Sharif. I need to show Roz the farm. Chapter 5, The Farm. Mr. Sharif turned and shouted, Come here, Rambler. A moment later, a pickup truck automatically rolled out of the garage. The truck pulled up to the man and the robot, and its doors opened wide, and they both climbed in. Rambler had a steering wheel, but Mr. Sharif sat back and let the truck drive itself. They followed the driveway behind the house and across the backyard, past the trees and the hedges, and suddenly they were surrounded by farm buildings. The buildings were different sizes and shapes, and all were white with gray roofs. They were so tightly packed together you could hardly tell where one began and the next one ended. Some were spattered with mud, others had holes and loose boards. The entire place smelled like grass and manure. Mr. Sharif pointed out each building to Roz. There was an enormous dairy barn, the milking parlor, the workshop, the machine shed. Smaller sheds were scattered all around. Rambler drove out from the buildings and back down the side of the hill onto a wide sweep of farmland. A fence lined this part of the driveway, and behind the fence was a sprawling, rolling pasture, lush with tall grass and a few leafy trees. That's where the herd was grazing. The cows swished their tails and chewed their cud and followed the truck with their eyes. One of them let out a long moo. This is the dairy farm, said Mr. Sharif. So these cows are the queens around here. Your whole world now revolves around them. Understand? I understand, said Roz, as she stared at the young calf who was staring back at her. They rolled past the herds of cows and past the clumps of wildflowers, past a quiet pond and past the birds and the field mice and the bumblebees. The driveway cut through a row of trees on its way out to the crop fields, which were flat and square and covered with bright green sprouts. Hilltop Farm was bursting with life, but it had seen better days. Patches of weeds and bare dirt were spreading across the fields. Broken down farm machines and piles of junk were strewn across the yards. Thick tangles of brush were creeping in from the edges of the property. They all drove they drove all the way out to the furthest fields to a little roundabout at the very end of the driveway. Rambler shut off its engine, and the man in the robot sat and looked at the countryside. Far off, where the land met the sky, a train quietly slid along the tracks and disappeared to the north. Then all was still. This farm needs help, said Mr. Sharif at last. It's been in my family for generations, and I don't want to lose it. But I can't do farm work anymore, not with this bad leg. That's why you're here. They say Razum robots can learn to do almost every kind of job, and you'll have to do almost every kind of job on this farm. I understand, said Roz. We've had automatic machines for years, said Mr. Sharif, but we didn't need a robot until my wife died. Those last words hung in the air for a while. The silence was finally broken by a low ramble of thunder. A storm was approaching. Tornado season was still months away, but in farm country, any storm could be dangerous. Let's go home, said Mr. Sharif. Rambler started his engine and drove all the way back down the long driveway. By the time they reached the farm, there was a steady rain falling, and the cows were in the barn. This is for you, said Mr. Sharif, and he handed Roz her own computer. That controls the farm equipment, and it's got all the information you'll need to do the work here. Do you know how to use a computer? Yes, I know how to use a computer. Roz had never used a computer before, but she instinctively knew what to do. Clearly, the robot was designed to do work with technology. Study up tonight and start farming tomorrow, said Mr. Sharif. You can stay in the machine shed with the other machines. Perhaps I should stay in the cow barn, said Roz. My whole world now revolves around them. The man smirked, and he said, I like the way you think, Roz. And that's where we'll pause for today.